Right, there we are. Good. Windows, too many folks doing this. Computers, how do they work? Right, so who am I? Thank you very much for the intro. I'm James Smith. You may know me as Floppy on Twitter, which is, if not dignified, then at least unique. And I work at the Open Data Institute here in London. I'm an engineer, by background software engineer. I'm a parent. I also have stories about who, they're not quite so entertaining ones. For those of you who aren't parents in the audience, it goes through all the different colours of the rainbow in the first week. So you're Googling like every day, different colours. Anyway, that's not what this is about. And I'm an activist. I do things in my spare time like using the web to fix small problems like climate change and democracy and things like that. It's small stuff. But I'm here to talk about data. So, the Open Data Institute is where I work. We're a non-profit. We've been going about 3 years. We're based here in London. And we're here to connect, equip, and inspire people around the world to innovate with data. And that's, we do that in a whole bunch of different ways. So, we have a membership network, a whole bunch of different organisations working with data, working on different aspects of that. We have a global network of nodes. We have 25 nodes around the world. I think that's still the current count. And that's ever expanding. We do a lot of training. So training up people in organisations to understand, to think in terms of data, to think about what that means in terms of their culture. A lot of what we have to deal with is culture change within organisations, from thinking about data as being something that's mine, to something that, well, what can we do with it? How can we use it? And to that end, we do a lot of policy work. We do other things. We have a services team that do consultancy in various organisations, and we have a whole bunch of startups in an incubation programme. These are just a few. We have a few new ones as well. And these guys are building really innovative stuff built on top of data that's out there. Check any of those out, they're absolutely fascinating. And on top of that, we do some R&D activities. And my role is head of the labs program. And that is the technical R&D side of the ODI. We look at evolving the state of the art across all types of data, by creating creating tools, still in my head, by creating tools, standards and techniques for the benefit of everyone. This is our ideas board, which is in the office. Behind the logo there, it says Grinder for Data, which I thought I'd cover up on, but I've told everyone about it, so never mind. As I say, with the Open Data Institute, we started as focusing on open data specifically. I'll get into what that is in a little while, but now we've sort of broadened our scope a little bit. We think of ourselves more in terms of the word separately. We're interested in all kinds of openness, whether that's open innovation, open government, open society, open data, open source, everything. And we're interested in all types of data, not just open data, but the world is full of data. There is open data, shared data, closed data, and I'll get into a little bit more of that in a minute. And also, we are, as I say, we're a non-profit institute. We have this responsibility to be, awkward in a way. We kind of like to be a critical friend to organisations, to sort of hold them to account. Anyway, so I want you to stop thinking about people, which is an interesting thing at an IA conference. Instead, I want you to think about robots, and how quite obviously they're going to take over the world. Because the web is not, as Mike said in the intro, the web is not just for people anymore. The web is for machines and for robots. We started out 25 years ago with the Web of Documents, as our Tim Berners-Lee is on our board, and he's created this amazing thing that's changed all our lives. over the last 25 years, and we've come through the growth of that web of documents, of information, of sort of human-readable stuff. And that's getting pretty big. But we're about to go into a point where there are billions of connected sensors, where there are billions of machines putting data out onto the net, as well as people. And those machines need to understand, and also consuming that data. They need to understand what's there, just as well as people do. So, more and more machine-readable data, more sensors, internet of fridges and microwaves and baby monitors and everything. And that's just going to scale even more. So the amount of data that's travelling around on the web in the future, most of it will be machine data, not human, if you like. And the scope is huge. So that's kind of where we're going. But data is, there's an analogy with thinking about data as oil. A couple of years ago, data is the new oil. We're going to drill the data, we're going to extract all the value, we're going to burn the data. No. No, it wasn't that. But it was a resource to be used. Data isn't oil. Data is roads. Data is infrastructure for the modern age. The modern world runs on data, and that's only increasing and going to increase even more. And so we start to see data as a sort of fundamental thing underlying modern society. So, which bits of data infrastructure? Is it all infrastructure? Is it at different levels? If it's infrastructure, who owns it? Who maintains it? And how do we work that out? That's some of the stuff we're thinking about. And this data lies on a spectrum. You've heard of open data, hopefully, I've already said it a few times. But also, personal data, big data, government data, all this stuff. It all comes down to lying on this spectrum, and this is a thing that we've sort of identified this thing we call the data spectrum. And your data goes, or any information you have will be somewhere on this. It doesn't matter if it's small, medium, or big. Nobody knows what those things mean anyway. Is big data just something that's too big to fit in memory? Because that's still pretty damn big these days. Who knows? It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter if it's personal data, government data. You can have big personal data like the data from my Fitbit, or you can have small government data like the spending on wine from the House of Lords, for instance. Well, that is quite big. Off track. So, but it all lies on this spectrum from closed to shared to open. And starting at the closed end, closed is the stuff you really don't want to get out. It might be your nuclear launch codes, right? Closed doesn't necessarily mean secure. This is terrifying. 20 years, the launch codes were all zeros. Anyway, don't think about that. It's amazing we're here at all. That's not the point. But it's the stuff you really don't want to get out. It's stuff that shouldn't be shared, that shouldn't be available to anyone, apart from you. Then we go into shared data. And shared data, there's a few different ways that might be done, but one of the things we've been working on recently is this open banking standard, which was launched about 3 weeks ago. And this is an open standard for access to banking data, your bank account information. It's an open API, it's an open standard, but it's very much not open data, it's your personal data. You control who has access to it, you're put in control of where that data goes. But you can share it. So you have some element of control. Nice. Just turn my notifications off. It'll be fine. As long as my wife doesn't send me any texts, it'll be fine. Thanks. This is fun. That was Open Data Taylor Swift. That's a bot we have that replaces all mentions of the word open data with Taylor Swift. We have another one for blockchains and Beyonce, and that one's really actually quite insightful. We wrote a whole article like, okay, right, yeah, trolls, I'm telling you something. Right, there we go. Got away with it, nobody noticed anything. Right, so, shared data. And then you go into the realm of open data. And this is information that is freely out there for anybody to use. And it could be something like this. This was launched yesterday, I think, and this was 150,000 food diaries that DEFRA collected over the 70s, 80s and 90s, all collected together, released as open data, and we did some visualization on it. You can have a look at this, it's all interactive and lovely. And you can see things like in 2002, we had peak meat pie in this one. And that's, it's great, it's fascinating, it really is. We're drinking a lot less tea than we were, and also marmalade, so who knows what that means. Or it might be something like transparency data. If you're looking at corruption, things like that, why shouldn't, FIFA be publishing open data about all of this stuff that they're getting in a lot of trouble for? Or it might be as simple as identifiers, about standards. GDS at the moment are doing some interesting work on registers, about standard identifiers for things, so that you can talk about something in a consistent way and know that when I'm talking about a company, you're also talking about exactly the same company. Because data is not just roads, but it's better when it's connected. The road network built up, it started in isolated towns and villages, they'd have their own paved roads and things like that, but they weren't connected, you still have dirt tracks between them. And then they were connected over the years. Some of the toll roads, things like that, but they were connected together into a network, into an infrastructure, and that unleashed huge amounts of productivity. And data doesn't necessarily, a lot of open data publishing at the moment is not really very good. This is an FOI request that I found while I was sat at the back. Somebody asked for all the charitable donations to a particular charity, and what they got was a whole bunch of scanned receipts. That may have answered their question, but it doesn't tell us anything in any useful, structured way. The worst example I've seen of this was a spreadsheet that somebody had taken, we think, a screenshot of. Then they'd taken the image, pasted the image into a cell of an Excel spreadsheet, and then released that. There is a special level of hell. So, enough talk about that, I'm going to talk about music. This is a band, they're a great band. This is Raw Funk Maharishi. Check them out. I'm not in this band, but my colleague is. The drummer on the end is my friend Sam, who is the head of robots at the ODI. He does all of our ops work, all of our infrastructure, and has possibly the best job title there is. And because Sam's a data nerd, but is in a band, he's done some interesting stuff, and I thought it would be a useful example to look at how we can think about how you present information in different ways. It's something you might not really think about. So, at the weekend, Sam does things like make a website for his band, which is pretty good, lists his gigs, things like that. One of the really interesting things about this band is, I believe it's the only band in the world you can book via a GitHub pull request. Please do so, they're very good. It really is amazing. Like I say, not entirely normal people. But also, data. The website. There's a website, this is the sort of thing you normally get on a band's website, where the next gig is, when it is, a map, things like that. And that's all very useful. But say I'm not a human, I'm not reading this. How am I going to work out what this is? Say I've got a script, I want to find all the gigs that are in London, in Hoxton in the next 2 weeks, and I'm crawling the web to find that. How am I going to find it? And so the first thing I'm going to tell you about, show you, is JSON-LD. Look this up, great website. And this is a way of including data in your pages in a very simple way. You use a script tag with a block of JSON in it. And inside that page that I showed you, there's a script tag at the bottom, and it has all the same information. Title of the gig, start date, location, who's performing, what the canonical URL for the band is. Mm-hmm. And this is really useful stuff. And it's very, very simple to do. And this makes the page understandable to machines in a very easy way. In the standard way, this is using standard vocabularies from schema.org, which has things like types like music event and music group. And whenever I read those, I always think this. But, whatever. Taxonomies are weird. Or difficult, at least. But this is the kind of thing that, I don't know why Square pushes the example, it's one we always use. This is the kind of stuff that lets Google do this. It doesn't do it for raw func Maharishi, unfortunately, because they whitelist it seems. But it's what lets Google do that. And it's allowing the machines to understand the context of what it is you're talking about. Now, that's the kind of idea where your website is your API. They don't have to be different. A lot of people think, oh, we've got a website now, we need APIs. They can be the same. This stuff can be embedded. Raw func Maharishi publish their data in 3 different ways, not just one, or 0 as most patterns do. So you can see at the bottom of the website, there is a little button there that says Data API and Developer Blog, but yeah, Data API. So they have an API for the band, because and this is providing exactly the same information, but for a different kind of endpoint, for a different kind of machine. But it's still very, very simple. It's providing pretty much the same types of data. And this is a page describing the entire set of data for the band, all the data the band has. And this one can be marked up with something called DCAT, which is a way of talking about an entire set of information in one go. There's a guide on the ODI website, look up marking up your data set of DCAT, and it's a way of saying, okay, here is some to a machine, here is some data, here's what it's about, here's the description, here's who maintains it, here's the license, and it can all be understood automatically. DCAT is a little bit more complicated, and I won't expect you to look at that. Have a look at the guide, but essentially it's still basically the same stuff. When you're marking up the when the data was last released, or what the title is, it's just extra properties in the tags. So it's in the normal pages. It's extra markup, which is the stuff we're used to doing with, for SEO or for whatever. It's all kind of the same thing. Of course, 2 ways of publishing data are not enough. So here's the third, and third is sort of simple data dumps. So actually, this is the data that drives that website. It's all done through GitHub Pages. This is a simple YAML set of data, but this could be CSV, for instance. A lot of data out there. Data publishing doesn't have to be hard. CSV is really, really simple, although it is surprisingly hard to get right. Or rather, sorry, it's surprisingly easy to get wrong, which is why we've written validator. So we have W3C validators for whether your markup is correct, whether your accessibility rules are correct, whether your CSS is good. Now we have one whether your data is usable. Because a lot of the time, renaming your Excel file to CSV is not entirely predictable. But that happens a disturbing amount. So, we can make sure this stuff is correct. Another ways we can make sure that the data out there is good and machine readable and usable is through a thing we've built also called open data certificates. And this is a way of giving like a kite mark to publishing data. So a bit like you might have a accessibility standard or something like that. There are machine readable accessibility standards. And so we have a certificate at the bronze level for the raw func Maharishi data API. It tells you where the data is published, how often it's updated, what the license is, the most important one, what type of thing it is. It's an API for accessing the data. There's a whole load more stuff down here, which goes into the different questions. But fundamentally, the most important one with open data is that open data is data that anyone can access, use, or share. And that really comes down to the licensing. So when you're looking at releasing data, when you're looking at exposing data from the system, licensing is the most important thing to think about. And we recommend Creative Commons licenses now, are really good for data. Creative Commons 4 works very, very well. And all of these work as open data licenses, free for anyone to use. So it can be public domain, anybody can do what they want. CC BY, where they have to attribute where the data came from, that's fine. CC BY share alike, if somebody changes or manipulates the data, they have to share their changes. That's okay. One thing that isn't on there is non-commercial. Okay. So if the data's restricted use, i.e. not commercial use, you're a little bit further back on that data spectrum. You're not quite in the fully open. You're in pretty widely shared, but not completely free. And that's okay, but it's not completely technically open. There are hybrid models around this. We have one of our startups as Open Corporates, who have an open database of companies for the entire world, millions of companies around the world with standard identifiers, things like that. And they have a hybrid model where it's free for non-commercial use, but you pay for commercial. Sorry, I've got a cough, so. So the certificates help us to pull some of that out, to expose that. They're all machine readable as well. So, machines can use these to explore that web of data. They also provide reliability for people building things on top of the data. So we have a whole bunch of startups who are using open data. The last thing you want to do is mortgage your home to start up a new company based on some data when you don't know whether the people publishing that data are committed to updating it, correcting it, improving it, and supporting you in your use of it. And this is really, really important. If we're going to get this stuff used more, there has to be commitment to supporting the users. And it's important to document things like quality issues or limitations of the data, so that people know what they're supposed to do with it, what can they do with it, what can't they, what shouldn't they infer from the data. Data can be difficult. Data is at the very low level of the pyramid, which I realise now I should have put on a slide, from data to information to knowledge to decisions. And it's easy to misinterpret data. So it's important to explain to people what it is, where it's come from, what the provenance is, how it's been quality controlled, things like that. But also where to get help. How often is it updated? Is there somebody at the end of a support email address that you can talk to about that information? And privacy. Open data shouldn't have personal data within it. You can't be going around releasing people's personal information out into the wild, not least because it would be illegal, but because it's not the right thing to do, which I guess is kind of the same thing, hopefully, normally. And you do get this confusion between open APIs that allow access to personal data in a controlled way and open data. They're not necessarily the same thing. Think about where they lie on that spectrum. It's best, we find, to put the user in control of their data, to decide who they can give access to and tell them what they need to know about using it. And data literacy is really, really important in educating your users if you're allowing them to do something with that information. Explaining to them in simple ways what they can or what they can be doing is important. So, back to the robots. This all helps robots understand the world and the web. What's well designed for humans may not be well designed for robots. I was really quite pleased when I worked out I could get these images because of that. It just makes me happy. I did consider filling the entire thing with just GIFs of robots falling over. And actually that's where I started. But, so, when you're thinking about design, when you're thinking about your content, what's in these systems that you're building, don't just think about humans. Think about infrastructure. Think about where your data lies on this spectrum and how you can maybe unlock more value from it by opening some of it up. Even if it's maybe just a set of identifiers, a set of standards. What if Foursquare or something was opening up a standard URL for every business or every location? Something like that. This stuff is powerful and it unleashes more value. And it's not that by doing that you'll lose out, but we all benefit more when things are connected. Closed off roads don't take us anywhere. Privately shared roads help a few people, but mainly exist to keep people out. Only open roads connect us together. And so by connecting roads together, we as a species have built what's arguably the largest single artifact mankind has ever made, the Eurasian road network. You can drive across a single object from one end of Africa to the far parts of, I don't know, where's the first point? Siberia, something like that. Should check that. But it's a single thing, and that's made possible by connections, by networks. Imagine the power when all of our data connects in the same way. And data, as I said, data in general, open data particularly, is changing the nature of the world, of politics. and of business. We're moving to a shift towards an open network society. And that, to me, is incredibly exciting. And we're moving into a future that is much, much more open. And that's for the benefit of everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, James. That's fantastic. So we will take a couple of questions for James if anyone's got one.
This might be a little bit of a tangent, but you use the analogy of...
Yes, I grabbed it.
Turn it off at the bottom. There's a switch. It's okay, it's
If you want to shout, I can repeat the question as well.
That's all right, I can forget. Just on a tangent maybe, but you use the analogy of roads, but it also helps if people feel they can drive on it a little bit. As exciting as open data is, I still feel that the people would understand it a lot more if they could play with it, but it still seems very closed. You know,
Absolutely.
even people, I know a little bit of coding, but it always goes wrong.
Yeah.
Are there any sort of ways for that? Is there anything that you're aware of in making it that people can start to play?
So, just for the benefit of the rest of the audience, people will only really start to understand data when they can play with it, when they can use it, and when they can really do things with it. And whether there are any resources out there that people can do that with. I think that's the really important thing with a lot of the stories that we try and tell around data. It's not that we think that everybody will be using the data directly. It's that it's going to underpin things that everybody uses. So, for instance, who got here using Citymapper? That's all open data, but you don't care. It's open data in most of the cities across the world. And that's, it doesn't matter. It just makes your life better. And that's the really important thing. And that's where the combination of user experience, IA thinking, all of that stuff will make usable experiences for people on top of this data. In terms of what's out there to play with, there are tools out there to explore. Off the top of my head, it is still quite a esoteric area, I suppose. You need a little bit of understanding to do that. But one of the things we're trying to do is get more of that simple understanding out there through training, things like that. But yeah, there is almost going. Anyone else? Go for it.
I thought the Foursquare example was kind of interesting because in their latest round, it kind of showed that the app isn't that valuable, possibly, but the data that they have is very valuable. So how do you make an argument for a commercial enterprise like that to actually think about opening their data? Is like what are the hurdles for them to do that?
That's really interesting. So the question was Foursquare of realising the latest round that the app is a valuable thing, that the data is, and how do we make a case for them to be opening it up? That's fascinating, actually, because I picked that example just completely off the cuff, and I didn't know they'd done that. Or they found that. Yeah, absolutely, the data is valuable. What will be interesting to know, and what the case we'd make to an organisation like that, is which bits of the data are the USP, and which ones will actually unlock more value when they're connected to others. So if other people start talking about the world in terms of Foursquare URLs, for instance, do they have some other benefit that they can gain from that? By becoming part of the infrastructure, do they unlock more value? And that's, we help companies to navigate those questions and to understand that maybe that, a lot of the time to even understand that is a question, and to come to that conclusion that they have that the data actually is one of the valuable things. But a lot of companies just have a whole load of data, and most of it isn't fundamental to their business model. Most of it isn't, wouldn't do any harm if it was released. And there's potential for connections, potential for value.
Okay, one more question.
Where does you see the user in this ecosystem of data? I create data that I share, but then I completely cut out of all the spectrum of it.
Yeah, so where does the user sit? You create a whole load of data and you can't control it anymore. At the moment, we live in a world where that's pretty much the case. You have, lots and lots of companies, lots of organisations have information on all of us, but we don't have control over that. I mean, personally, I'd like to see much more putting of the user in control of their data, in control of who has it. And the open banking thing's really interesting in that sense because it doesn't say, right, we're going to make it easier for banks to share information with each other, which actually was one of the original drivers for it. But now it is about, well, now the user can decide who they want to share that information with in a, in some simple way. And the simple part of that is going to be UX and, explaining things to people and helping everyone to become more data literate, which is a big challenge because we're not used to it yet.
Let's hear it once again for James Smith.